My name is Clara Benson, 31 years old, an interior designer living in Portland, Oregon, a woman who once believed that love and family were the two most sacred things in life. I spent an entire year planning my wedding, the pure white dress, the warm golden lights, the lavender bouquets I handpicked myself. But when the ceremony began, the seats reserved for my family were completely empty. No text, no call, no explanation. People stared, whispered. I smiled, trying to hide the pain gnawing at every breath. They used to say I was too sensitive, too ambitious, never enough to be loved. But at that moment, beneath the lights and wedding music, I finally understood it was time to tell my own story and make sure they would never forget my name again. When I was a child, silence was my second skin. In the Benson household, words had weight, and mine carried none. My mother adored my older brother, Ethan the golden boy, the family's pride. Straight A student, football captain, charming smile. At every dinner she'd ask, "Ethan, how was practice?" Or, "Ethan, your teacher called. She said you're amazing again." And when she turned to me, her tone softened, but not out of love, out of obligation. "Clara, did you clean your room today?" That was my place, the background noise in a family that only celebrated one song. I remember the day of my 10th birthday. I waited in the kitchen, wearing a pink dress I'd begged my mom to buy months ago. I'd decorated the table myself, uneven balloons, a slightly tilted cake I made with my aunt's help. I sat there for hours, waiting for them to come home from Ethan's soccer tournament. When they finally arrived, sweaty and excited, they carried a giant trophy. My father patted Ethan on the back, shouting, "That's my boy!" My mother hugged him, kissed his forehead, and said, "You're the best thing that ever happened to us." I was still sitting by the cake, candles half melted. No one noticed. No one even asked whose birthday it was. That night, I blew out the candles alone, made a wish. "Please, let them see me." But they never did. As I grew older, I learned the language of invisibility, how to move quietly, how to smile even when ignored, how to pretend I didn't care. I studied harder than Ethan, stayed up nights sketching designs, hoping my talent would earn me what affection couldn't: attention. When I got accepted into an art school in Chicago, I thought finally, they'll be proud. But when I told them, my mother barely looked up from her phone. "Oh, honey," she said, "that's cute. But are you sure you don't want to study something useful? Like business? You could work for your brother one day." Quote. That sentence hit me like a brick, not because it was cruel, but because it was ordinary for her. She didn't even realize she'd crushed me. By my 20s, I had mastered the art of pretending everything was fine. I visited home for holidays, brought thoughtful gifts, cooked, cleaned, and still watched as they surrounded Ethan with love and laughter. While I sat at the edge of the table, holding my glass, invisible as ever. One Christmas, my father raised a toast to Ethan for keeping the family name alive, for being our pride. Everyone cheered. I whispered, "And what about me?" under my breath. But no one heard it. Maybe I didn't even say it out loud. The breaking point came a few years later. I had just finished designing my first cafe interior in downtown Portland, minimalist. Soft light, earthy tones, a space that felt alive. The owner was thrilled. A local magazine wanted to feature my work. It was my first taste of real success, and I couldn't wait to tell my parents. I called home. My mom answered. "Hey, Mom," I said, voice trembling with excitement. "Guess what? My design got published. It's—" "Oh, Clara, that's nice," she interrupted. "But can I call you back? Ethan's got a big deal today. We're all heading out to celebrate." The line went dead. I stared at my phone for a long time. My reflection on the black screen looked like someone I barely recognized. Someone small, forgotten, fading. That was the night I decided I wouldn't ask for their love anymore. I packed my things and moved to a small apartment downtown. No help, no calls, no family dinners. I worked 3 jobs: cafe waitress by morning, design assistant by day, freelancer by night. Every paycheck was a step away from the people who taught me that love had to be earned. I stopped waiting for their approval. Instead, I started building my own version of it through hard work, through passion, through the quiet satisfaction of creating something beautiful with my own hands. And the more I succeeded, the more I realized maybe being invisible wasn't a curse. Maybe it was a kind of freedom. When no one expects anything from you, you can become anything. Years later, when I finally opened my first design studio, my name on the glass door, sunlight spilling across my sketches, I thought of that 10-year-old girl sitting by her melting birthday cake. I wanted to tell her, they never saw you, Clara, but that's okay, because one day the whole world will. And I smiled, because the truth was, their neglect didn't destroy me. It built me. It sharpened me into someone they'd never be able to ignore again. Leaving Portland wasn't just a move. It was an escape, an unspoken rebellion, a quiet declaration that I was done being the ghost in my own life. I packed my belongings into 3 boxes, sold my old car, and took a bus to Seattle. The city felt like rain, unpredictable, alive, and somehow welcoming. I didn't know a single person there, but for the first time, that didn't scare me. It thrilled me. The first few months were brutal. My apartment was small, barely enough room for a bed, a desk, and a dream. I survived on instant noodles and black coffee. My fingertips cracked from drawing late into the night, sketching designs I couldn't afford to build. But every sketch felt like a heartbeat proof that I was still here, still fighting, still mine. I took any job I could find. Mornings at a local coffee shop, afternoons assisting a senior designer at a firm that barely paid minimum wage, nights freelancing online. I learned to design for cheap clients who wanted something modern but paid next to nothing. I didn't complain. I soaked up every experience, every critique, every rejection, because I had nothing left to lose, and that made me dangerous in the best way. One evening, I was cleaning tables at the cafe when I overheard a woman talking about remodeling her art gallery. Something inside me clicked. I walked up to her, hands trembling, voice shaking, and said, "I'm a designer. I can help you for half the price anyone else would charge." She looked me up and down, skeptical. "You're a barista." I smiled. For now. 2 weeks later, she hired me. That gallery project changed everything. I poured every ounce of creativity I had into it. I spent nights experimenting with textures and light, blending wood, metal, and glass in a way that made the space feel like it breathed. When the project was finished, the owner was stunned. "This doesn't look like work from a beginner," she said softly. "It's not," I replied. "It's from someone who's been waiting her whole life to be seen." The gallery was featured in a local magazine. My email exploded with inquiries. Suddenly, I wasn't just surviving, I was becoming. Within a year, I left the cafe and the firm behind. I registered my own business, Benson Interiors. Ironically, I kept the family name. Not as a tribute, but as a trophy. A reminder that I'd turned something that once caused me pain into a brand people admired. Work poured in cafes, offices, homes. I designed with empathy, with emotion, with the kind of attention I'd always craved but never received. My clients didn't just want pretty rooms. They wanted spaces that felt alive, and I gave them that. But success didn't come without whispers. Some people in the industry said I was too emotional, too personal, that I treated design like therapy. Maybe I did. Maybe every wall I painted, every light I hung was my way of rebuilding the home I never had, and people loved it. By the end of the second year, my studio had 5 employees. My designs appeared in 2 national magazines. I received invitations to collaborate on luxury projects. I was exhausted but fulfilled, the kind of tired that feels like purpose, not defeat. Then came the night that changed everything. I was standing in my studio, surrounded by sketches and fabric samples, when I got a message from a number I hadn't seen in years. "Mom, saw your name in a magazine. The pictures look beautiful. We're so proud of you, honey. Maybe we can visit sometime?" My hands went cold. The room blurred. For a long moment, I just stared at the message, unsure if I wanted to laugh or cry. They were proud now? After years of silence, after ignoring every call for attention, every attempt at love? A part of me wanted to reply, to scream, "Where were you when I needed you?" But he didn't. Instead, I turned off my phone, turned on the studio lights, and looked around. Every corner, Every piece of furniture, every soft glow of the lamps, they all whispered the same thing back to me. You did this. Without them, the following weeks were strange. Their message kept haunting me not because I wanted them back, but because it reminded me of who I used to be, the girl who waited for approval, the girl who begged to be noticed. That girl was gone. I was no longer chasing validation. I was the validation. Still, a seed of something darker began to grow. I wondered if they realized how deeply their absence had shaped me. I wondered if they would ever understand that their neglect was the reason I'd become the woman they now admired from afar. I didn't want revenge in the cruel sense. What I wanted was closure, the kind that only comes when you make the people who once ignored you finally look you in the eye and see what they lost. And so, as my business expanded and my name gained weight in the design world, a quiet idea began to take shape in the back of my mind, a way to confront my past not with anger, but with elegance. A way to make them remember the girl they left behind. Success changes many things. The way people talk to you, look at you, and remember you. But the biggest change is how the people who once ignored you suddenly decide they've always been proud. That's what happened to me. It started with a Facebook message from my brother Ethan. Hey Clara, long time no talk. Mom and Dad mentioned you've been doing amazing things. Would love to catch up sometime. I stared at the message for nearly 10 minutes. His profile picture was the same smug grin. I remembered the smile of a man who never had to fight for love because it was handed to him. I almost deleted the message, but curiosity got the better of me. I replied, short and polite. Hope you're doing well, Ethan. Yeah. A few hours later, my phone rang. Mom. Clara, sweetheart. Oh my God, it's been so long. We're so proud of you. Your brother showed us your article in Modern Design Monthly. You've come so far. Her voice was the same, sugar-coated, effortless, the tone of someone pretending everything was fine. Thanks, Mom, I said flatly. We were thinking, she continued, maybe we could all get together soon. You know, as a family again. As a family again. The words made my stomach twist. There was never an again, because there was never really an us. Still, something inside me wanted to see them. Not because I missed them, but because I needed to look them in the eye and know that I no longer needed their approval. So I agreed. We met at a restaurant downtown, a place I'd designed myself, ironically. They didn't seem to notice. When I walked in, Mom gasped dramatically, hugging me, as though she hadn't spent a decade pretending I didn't exist. Dad followed, patting my shoulder awkwardly. Ethan arrived last, flashing his practiced grin. Clara, look at you. Seattle's most famous designer, huh? He said, pulling out my chair like he'd been a gentleman all his life. I smiled. Something like that. Dinner was polite at first. They asked about my business, my clients, the magazines. It was surreal, like being interviewed by strangers pretending to be my family. But beneath their flattery, I could feel the agenda forming. It came midway through dessert. So, Ethan said casually, Mom and Dad were talking. You know, my construction company's been growing fast, but we could really use someone like you to give our showrooms a more modern edge. You'd be perfect. And there it was. I laughed softly. You want me to design for your company? Dad leaned forward, smiling too eagerly. It would be a win-win. Family working together just like old times. Old times. The phrase made me almost choke on my coffee. Old times? I asked quietly. You mean when you forgot my birthday? When I called about my first design job and you hung up because Ethan got a promotion? The table went silent. Mom's smile faltered. Oh, Clara, don't dig up the past. We all made mistakes. No, you made choices, I corrected. You chose who to love and who to forget. They shifted uncomfortably. Ethan cleared his throat, trying to smooth things over. Look, we're just saying this could be great exposure for both of us. I mean, your name on our projects? That's a big deal. I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms. Exposure, I repeated. Funny, that's what you called me when I was a kid. Invisible exposure. Dad sighed. Clara, must you always be so dramatic? That sentence hit me harder than I expected. It was the same tone, the same dismissal that had followed me my whole life. The realization settled like glass in my chest. Nothing had changed. They hadn't come to reconnect. They'd come to profit from me. But instead of anger, I felt something entirely different. Clarity. I appreciate the offer, I said finally, my voice calm. But I don't mix family with business, especially not with a family that only remembers me when they need something. Mom blinked, stunned. Clara, that's not fair. I stood up. Neither was being your daughter. And with that, I left. Outside, the air was cold, sharp. My reflection in the restaurant window looked different now, taller, stronger, finally seen. I realized I didn't need to prove anything anymore. Their validation no longer held value. Yet as I walked away, a thought lingered in the back of my mind, not bitter, not vengeful, just poetic. They wanted me to design for them? Fine. I would, but on my own terms. Not for their company. For myself. A vision began to form, a new kind of project, a space that told my story, not theirs. A space where the walls whispered truth, not lies. A space where they would finally see what they had done and what I had become. That night, I returned to my studio and opened my sketchbook. My hands moved without hesitation, shaping an idea that was equal parts creation and confrontation. It wouldn't be about anger. It would be about reclamation. I wrote the title on the first page, The House That Forgot Its Daughter. Quote, a design exhibition built like a home, filled with rooms inspired by memories they'd erased. And when it was finished, I'd invite them to see it, not for revenge, for truth. The idea came to me slowly, like light creeping into a dark room. I didn't want to destroy my family, not in the way people imagine revenge. I wanted something quieter, more elegant, something that would make them feel what I had felt. Invisible, small, unimportant. I called it The House That Forgot Its Daughter. It would be my next design exhibition, a walk-through art installation built like a home. Every room would tell a story: love, neglect, silence, and rebirth. To the public, it would look like a piece exploring emotional architecture. But I knew every corner, every shadow, every misplaced chair was about them. The concept consumed me. I barely slept for weeks. My team at Benson Interiors didn't know the full story behind it, only that it was personal. Are you sure you want to open this up to the public? My assistant, Maya, asked one morning. Yes, I said, tracing my pencil over a floor plan. Some stories deserve to be seen even by the people who never listened. I designed the first room as a replica of my childhood living room, the beige carpet, the crooked family portrait where my mother's hand rested proudly on Ethan's shoulder, while mine hung awkwardly at my side. But I made one change. In the corner of the room, where the light should have reached, I left a shadow, a small, dark figure sculpted out of glass. Transparent, fragile, almost invisible. The label under it read, "The daughter always there, never seen." The second room was my teenage bedroom. Walls painted pale pink, shelves full of sketchbooks, all open but blank. A speaker hidden behind the door played soft murmurs, indistinct adult voices saying things like, "She's too sensitive. She's not like Ethan. Why can't she be more normal?" The visitors wouldn't know whose voices they were, but I did. The next space was narrow and cold, a hallway lined with mirrors. Each one distorted, stretching or shrinking the reflection, depending on where you stood. The plaque on the wall read, "Perspective. The way you see me is not the way I am." That one made me cry as I built it. I remembered all those years trying to fit their version of me, quieter, smaller, more acceptable. This hallway was my rebellion against that distortion. The final room was bright, open, and breathtakingly simple, a recreation of my studio in Seattle. Sunlight streamed through large glass windows. In the center stood a single chair made of polished oak, strong and steady. The label beneath it read, "The woman who built herself, Guan." It took months to finish everything. When the day of the grand opening arrived, I sent invitations to my clients, friends, media outlets, and, most importantly, my family. The invitation to them was deliberate, black and white, embossed with silver text. An exhibition by Clara Benson, The House That Forgot Its Daughter. I didn't include any description. I wanted them to walk in blind, the same way they had walked through my life. The night of the opening was electric. Photographers clicked, guests whispered, music played softly in the background. I stood by the entrance, wearing a tailored black suit, confident, calm, unrecognizable from the girl they once ignored. And then I saw them, Mom, Dad, and Ethan, standing at the doorway, unsure, out of place. My mother's eyes widened as she read the title on the wall. Ethan looked around, confused. Clara, what is this? My father asked. An art installation, I said with a smile. About family. Yen. They stepped in. I watched from a distance as they moved from room to room, at first curious, then unsettled. My mother stopped at the glass sculpture in the first room, staring at the small, transparent figure. She reached out but didn't touch it. My father frowned at the hallway of mirrors, muttering, "What is she trying to say?" When they reached the final room, the one titled "The Woman Who Built Herself," I walked in behind them. "This," I said softly, "is who I became without you." Quote. Mom turned to me, eyes glistening. "Clara, this is cruel." I shook my head. "No, this is truth. You called me too emotional, too dramatic, too needy. I just turned all of that into art, into something that people actually see." Ethan crossed his arms. "You're exaggerating. We weren't that bad." "Maybe not," I said, "but you were absent, and sometimes absence hurts more than hate." They stood there in silence, surrounded by the very memories they'd erased. For once, they didn't have anything to say. That silence, the same silence that used to crush me now, felt like victory. Because this time, it wasn't born from indifference. It was born from recognition. They finally saw me. As the guests applauded in the next room and the press cameras flashed, my family quietly left. No dramatic confrontation, no apologies. Just quiet understanding, the kind that sinks deep and lingers. When the door closed behind them, Maya came up to me. "You okay?" she asked. I smiled. "I think so. For the first time in my life, I'm okay with being seen, even if it took this much to get here." That night, as I stood alone in the bright white studio, I realized something profound. My revenge hadn't been about hurting them. It was about reclaiming the narrative. They once erased me from their story. Now, I'd written myself into history in a language they could finally understand. Art. The morning after the exhibition, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Notifications, emails, tags journalists, influencers, art critics. The story had gone viral overnight. Headlines read, "Designer Clara Benson turns family trauma into art. The house that forgot its daughter, a haunting masterpiece. Revenge through art. A daughter's silent protest." But I didn't open any of them. I just sat by the window of my apartment, coffee in hand, watching the city wake up below. Portland looked softer that morning, as if the world had exhaled with me. Then my phone rang. Mom flashed on the screen. For a moment, my chest tightened. A part of me, the little girl who once waited for their approval, wanted to answer, but another part whispered, "Not yet." I let it ring until it stopped. Later that afternoon, I went to the gallery to check on the installation. It was quiet now, just the faint hum of the air conditioning and the lingering scent of fresh paint. A few visitors wandered through, moving slowly, almost reverently. As I stood in the final room, the woman who built herself, a woman approached me. She looked about my mother's age, tears brimming in her eyes. "Are you the artist?" she asked. "Yes," she nodded, her voice trembling. "I came with my daughter. We haven't spoken in years, but your exhibition, it made me realize how much silence can wound. I texted her just now. Thank you." I smiled, but my throat felt tight. "I'm glad it meant something to you." When she walked away, I sat down in the oak chair, at the center of the room, my symbol of rebirth, and exhaled. That was it. That was the real revenge. Not humiliation, not pain, but reflection. 3 days later, my father showed up at my office. He looked smaller somehow, his posture less rigid, his eyes weary. He stood in the doorway holding a single sunflower, my favorite. "May I come in?" he asked. I nodded. He sat across from me, glancing at the framed photo on my desk, me and my team smiling at the exhibition. "You've built quite a life, Clara." "I have." He hesitated. "Your exhibition. It was hard to watch, but it made me think. Maybe you're right, maybe we didn't see you. I thought giving you space meant love. I didn't realize it felt like neglect." For the first time, I saw something real in his eyes, guilt, not the kind that demands forgiveness, but the kind that understands why it might never come. I'm not angry anymore, Dad, I said softly. I just wanted you to see me not as the daughter you wanted, but as the woman I became. He nodded slowly, looking down. You made me see, Clara. You really did. That night, I finally listened to my mother's voicemail. Her voice was shaky, almost fragile. Clara, I went back to the exhibition today. I stayed for hours. I saw everything. I didn't realize how much you were hurting. I wish I had known. I wish I had asked. I love you, even if I never said it enough. I played it twice. Then I cried not the way I used to, out of pain or longing, but out of release. Because for the first time, her words didn't come too late. They came exactly when I was ready to hear them. Weeks passed, and the house that forgot its daughter became one of the most talked about art installations in the city. It was featured in magazines, art blogs, even a short documentary. But the best part wasn't the fame. It was the quiet messages I received from strangers. Your story helped me forgive my mother. I called my son after 3 years of silence. Thank you for reminding us that pain can become beauty. It made me realize something profound. My revenge had turned into a bridge. What began as a wound had become a mirror one that helped others see their own. One evening, Ethan texted me for the first time in years. Hey, I finally saw your exhibition. You were right. I didn't have your courage. I'm sorry. I'd like to start over as siblings if you'd let me. I stared at the message for a long time before typing back. We can start from here. No dramatics. No resentment. Just truth. By winter, the exhibition had run its course. I decided not to extend it. Some stories, I realized, deserve closure. On the final night, I stood alone in the empty gallery, running my hand over the oak chair one last time. The space felt different now, lighter. The echoes of pain had softened into peace. I turned off the lights and whispered, "Goodbye." As I walked out, snow began to fall over Portland, coating the streets in quiet white. I tilted my face toward the sky and smiled. I wasn't the forgotten daughter anymore. I was the woman who remembered herself, and that was enough. Revenge had brought me here, yes. But it wasn't destruction that healed me. It was creation. It was transformation. Sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't making others suffer. It's proving that you can rise and build something beautiful from what they broke. And that's exactly what I did. Spring arrived quietly in Portland. The city bloomed again, cherry blossoms lining the streets, soft rain tapping against my windows. I had just finished my morning coffee when I realized something strange. For the first time in years, my mind wasn't replaying old wounds. The silence inside me wasn't heavy anymore. It was peaceful. I had spent so long defining myself by what my family didn't give me, their approval, affection, acknowledgement, that I never noticed how much I had already built without them. My studio thrived, my team grew, and my art was finally something more than therapy. It was purpose. One afternoon, while organizing my studio, I found a small box tucked beneath my desk. Inside were old photographs, my mother laughing, Ethan holding my hand at a theme park, my father teaching me how to ride a bike. For a moment, I let myself feel everything: the grief, the nostalgia, the love that never disappeared, just got buried under years of misunderstanding. That night, I decided to call my mother. She answered on the second ring. Clara? Her voice was gentler than I remembered. Hi, Mom, I said. I listened to your voicemail. Thank you. There was a pause. I didn't expect you to call. I didn't either, I admitted. But I think I'm ready to let go of the anger. It doesn't mean I forget, but I don't want to carry it anymore. She exhaled softly, the sound almost like a sigh of relief. I'd like that too. We didn't talk about the exhibition. We didn't talk about the years we lost. Instead, we talked about her garden, about my latest design project, about Ethan's new job. It wasn't reconciliation in a cinematic sense, no tears, no grand apologies, but it was real, gentle, human, and that was enough. A few months later, I received an invitation to give a talk at an art symposium in New York. The theme, Healing Through Creation. When I stood on that stage, looking out at hundreds of faces, I felt something shift inside me. I began with the words I had once whispered to myself in the dark. Sometimes, The people who break you are also the ones who teach you how to rebuild. I told them my story not as a tale of revenge, but as one of rebirth. I spoke about the power of turning pain into purpose, about how art can expose what silence hides. When I finished, the audience stood and applauded. Some cried. That moment wasn't about my family anymore. It was about everyone who had ever felt unseen, and everyone brave enough to make themselves visible again. After the talk, a young woman approached me. "Your story saved me," she said through tears. "I was ready to give up on my dreams because of my parents' expectations. Now I think I'll start over." I smiled, feeling tears well up in my own eyes. "Then that's the best thing I've ever created," I said. That night, in my hotel room overlooking the city, I opened my journal and wrote, "I started with revenge. I ended with peace. I built a home inside myself, one that can't forget, but also doesn't need to hurt anymore." The house that once forgot its daughter had become the house that forgave her family and freed her heart. I closed my notebook, turned off the light, and for the first time in my life, slept without the echo of the past haunting me. I was no longer Clara, the forgotten daughter. I was Clara Benson, the woman who built herself, loved herself, and finally, forgave.